Welcome back to our interview series. Today we're here in Kosovo with President Osmani. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you for coming.
And we'll jump right in. So the first question is, you've studied law at home, abroad, like many students watching this interview. What are some of the lessons from your time studying that you still use now that you're president of Kosovo?
There are plenty. I would say there's not even a day that goes by that I don't use some of the lessons that I've learned as a student, whether here in Kosovo or in the United States. And I would say the most important one is that throughout my law studies, I always tried to understand that the letter of the law that we learn needs to be implemented in practice. So the way how that can be implemented in practice, as you know, is the biggest challenge for each and every lawyer, whether in law school or after you finish. And there are very strong principles that we are taught during the studies that I apply every day during my work, whether we're talking about principles of international law or principles of decision-making that guide me in my work. But at the same time, there are tricks that you learn during your law school studies that teach you how to deliver a message more effectively, how to be more convincing, how to be clearer in that message that you deliver, and how to make sure that the other party actually hears it and understands it. And these are, so many of the things that we were taught during our studies on the way how to present our arguments, the way how to make sure that they are not just heard but also accepted by those that we work with, and of course so many other things that we've learned. But I would say school does prepare you a lot, not entirely, obviously, not entirely, but it does prepare you a lot for the important work that we're engaged in. And then, of course, it was also my experience in the past 25 years in public service that has prepared me a lot for the work that I do today. So I would always say it's a combination of both. It's never just one or the other.
And one of the important works that you're focusing on is the European path of Kosovo. So in 2022, the membership application was submitted and the official status is potential member state. And since then, there's been visa-free travel. And of course, after the most recent election, the EU again highlighted that, quote, progress in the normalization of relations with Serbia is the way for Kosovo to achieve progress on this path.
Exactly.
And of course, so could you talk us through your European vision as president?
Well, my European vision is the European vision of the people of Kosovo. This is a nation where over 97% are pro-European, pro-Euro-Atlantic integration, a country that truly believes in the values on which the European Union was founded, which is why we want to join. It's not just about economic benefits or otherwise. For us, it's mostly about the values that we share and the beliefs that we share. And we've contributed to these values for so many years, and we want to continue that contribution. So I think joining of new countries within the European Union should never be seen as a burden, but rather than as a contribution that we can give. And being the youngest population in Europe with so many youth, brilliant youth that are tech-savvy, brilliant minds, so successful. I think that is a potential for the entire Europe, not just for our country. Now, Kosovo has been undertaking reforms that have been gaining the praise of the European Union every year when we get the country report. We're ahead of everyone else in the region. However, for pure political domestic considerations, I would say of a few countries in the EU, our application for membership has not even been looked at yet. And I'm working with leaders across Europe to make sure that they do that very soon, that they mandate the Commission to start working with Kosovo for a candidate status. Now, on one side, in terms of reforms and alignment, we are far ahead from any other country in the Western Balkans. But then in terms of actual steps, we're far behind. We're the only country in the Western Balkans without a candidate status. And as I said, that's not because of the lack of reforms, but it's for some political reasons that some member states are using, unfortunately. But in this way, I think the stability and peace of the entire Europe is being harmed by not allowing Kosovo to move forward. So we're going to continue working with our partners with the hope that they will all be convinced and we can move on with that very soon.
And you mentioned, of course, one of the aspects, aside from values, is also the economic development of Kosovo. What kind of economic development do you envision in Kosovo, also as part of this European path, and particularly also with a focus on the brilliant youth that you've already mentioned?
As you know, one of the most important potentials that Kosovo has is its human potential. And in the aging continent of Europe, that is quite an important capital. They are well educated. It's a highly skilled, group of people that are contributing to our economic development. Our private sector is thriving. Foreign investment is growing. It's largely due to the success of the work of the institutions of Kosovo in fighting crime and corruption and pushing forward reforms in so many areas. So we have had the highest GDP growth in the region in the past 4 years, and that is very important. Of course, we still face a lot of challenges, which is why working together with partners and allies within the European Union is crucial for us to move towards a more sustainable and long-term economic development. In that sense, investing in certain areas where Kosovo has potential, from the ICT sector to agriculture and others, has been a priority for our institutions. And as I said, while we've been doing pretty well, that doesn't mean the challenges don't remain. So we've been part of the new growth plan of the European Union. So Kosovo is going to be per capita the country that is going to benefit most. But now we're waiting for the new parliament to be constituted after the elections in Kosovo, so that the international agreements that are required in order to benefit from that growth plan are immediately ratified, with the hope that they get enough support. And then we can move on with more concrete projects that will increase economic growth here in Kosovo. Now, one certain aspect that I've been very much pushing for as president is to make sure that there's more good paying jobs, not just for youth, but also for women, because we have a very high inactivity rate when it comes to women's employment. So we need to create the conditions for women to seek jobs, good paying jobs where they can show their potential, a potential from which the entire country will benefit from. Because by keeping aside 50% of your labor force, if I may call it so, by your potential, you lose not just, socially speaking, but also economically. So for a thriving society, but also a thriving economy, we need to make sure that both women and women are equally thriving in this country. We're not there yet, but we're getting there, and we're working hard to make sure that it happens as soon as possible.
Professor Radon at Columbia has contributed to several constitutional processes over his years around the world, and of course you've actively shaped the constitutional process here in the Constitution Commission. Could you take us back to this process and perhaps the importance of inclusive decision-making?
It would take me quite long to explain, so maybe I can come over to Columbia and perhaps just talk about this in particular. It was a fascinating process, just imagine when you go to the United States and to different museums and institutions, you see the very first draft of the Constitution. You talk about the founding fathers and the intention of the drafters in Kosovo. Most of them are still alive, the people who crafted the process, because it's not just about writing, it's mostly about the process. And at that time I was chief of staff and legal advisor to the president, and President Sadriu was the one who led the process by appointing the committee. A committee that was a mix of institutional representatives, political representatives, and experts. We had a lot of international expertise and support as well, both from the United States as well as from the European Union and countries across the globe. And we came up with a constitution which even today remains the most advanced on European soil, especially when it comes to fundamental human rights and freedoms, as well as minority community rights. We're very proud of our constitution. We just had the anniversary of our Constitution Day. It's the backbone of our successful society, of our multi-ethnic country, of our resilient democratic institutions. And as I often say in my yearly State of the Union addresses at the Parliament, the patriotism that we need today is the constitutional patriotism, one where following the Constitution, honoring it, and making sure that it continues to be the backbone of our success is that the path that we follow. And it's very important that young generations are also taught about the importance of not just the document. It's more than a document, especially for a society like Kosovo's, who was never allowed to have a constitution. And this is our first one. Of course, it was amended a few times on tiny bits. However, it has resisted a lot of political turmoils, and it remains a very, very strong constitution, which was drafted, as I said, in a time that was historic for Kosovo, at a time when we were preparing to declare independence, and then right after it, I would say, professionally, the most rewarding part was the work that we did on drafting the chapter on fundamental rights and freedoms. Politically, the one that gave me most experience was participating in the negotiations between the three institutions, the presidency, the government, and the parliament, on what at that time we called the power sharing agreement, because there was this, of course, as you might imagine, like everywhere else, a fight over who gets what competence, and negotiations were happening at that table over there. And I, of course, was there in President's team. We negotiated for a long time. It was the part that took us most, until the President, the Prime Minister, and the Speaker of Parliament agreed on which areas would the President lead, which areas the government would lead, and which areas would the Parliament lead, as you know, in terms of oversight. And politically speaking, for me, that was one of the most important experiences, to see how that power sharing agreement was negotiated. There was a lot of politics, not just, you know, legal stuff around it. And then we came up with an agreement which was then became a document that helped us draft the three chapters of the Constitution that deal with the powers of the President, the powers of the Parliament, and the powers of the government. That was the last ones that we drafted. And then we had a constitution that had the acceptance and the approval of all, and we went ahead, and it was approved in the Parliament in April and entered into force in June. And since then, you know, we have a very active constitutional court that has actively participated in interpreting different parts of our constitution, and that has kind of made it richer in terms of how we interpret different provisions. So in our case, as it is in most countries around the world, when you look at a provision, you need to look at whether there is a constitutional court decision that interprets it, because it goes hand in hand with the actual provision. So it's been a fascinating process. And I would say it's still a developing process. It's not a dead document, you know, with so many constitutional court decisions that we have interpreting our constitution. It's an evolving document, and I think it's quite normal for every society, because it helps us be, you know, more in step with democratic principles and developments that we can see around the world.
Mm-hmm. And then the final question, you just came back from the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, where you, of course, met with your counterparts from around the world, and including two countries that just very recently recognized Kosovo's independence. So can you talk us through that? And also, what are some of the best practices that you share with other heads of state and government from Kosovo, where Kosovo has something really to show to the world how to work something out?
This forum is an important platform because countries from around the world, whether big or small, economically powerful or not, participate to see how we can find, solutions to our shared challenges, because most of the challenges that we face are actually what I call problems without passports. It doesn't really matter what nationality you have. We've been facing them. And we sit down with these countries and we discuss how we can learn from each other, how we can share experiences, and how we can support each other. And when it comes to smaller states, it's what we call small state to small state solidarity. We support each other. And Kosovo has had an enormous experience gained throughout the past 25 years that started with a peace-building process, a peacekeeping process initially, then peace-building process, and then state-building process, and the consolidation of our statehood, in, of course, in full compliance with international law, but through a process that has involved so much international backing and support. And it has helped us build very resilient democratic institutions and a strong support system for our people, including survivors of the war. Today is the 14th of April. It's our Memorial Day for survivors of sexual violence. And Kosovo is one of the few examples around the world where we've built a strong system to support the survivors. Now we share that system with countries around the world. We share our experience in how we draft a constitution that is very forward-looking and democratic and strong in terms of protection of human rights and minority rights. We share our experience in building strong democratic institutions that can resist, political turmoil. We share our electoral system, which is the strongest, I would say, not just in the Western Balkans, but in the wider region. A very strong electoral democracy. So we talk to countries that have gone through the same, especially recently, and we offer that expertise, on how we work towards reconciliation, how do we support justice institutions. They need this support because we've gone through the same, and we've offered the same support, let's say, to Ukraine, because reconstructing a country is not just about rebuilding its buildings, it's about rebuilding the human spirit, after all. So just that human dimension of reconstruction is so crucial. And I would say no country, especially in Europe, has that experience built in the same way that Kosovo has, in a successful way, because we have a lot of countries that unfortunately haven't been able to get out of turmoil, get out of suffering. But the case of Kosovo is a success story, one with which not just the people of Kosovo, but our partners are proud of. And now, we're ready to give back. Our partners around the world were there for us in our darkest hour, and now it's our time to give back and be there for nations around the world when they need us the most, in any way and in any capacity that we can.
Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you. A pleasure.